The developers at Visionary Realms have once again met up with Twitch streamer Cohh to show off Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Now, as always, the first thing to note here is that they are showing a work in progress, not a finished product. There's a really big milestone for the game's development coming up called Project Faerthale, which sounds like it will literally be a game changer. So if you don't know what that is, I made a video explaining it in detail, which I'll provide a link to. So please watch that now so you can understand the context of what's going on. The devs have been fairly quiet while they've been hard at work for the past 4 months or so, but they have finally popped their heads up to give us just some sneak peeks at the progress they've been making behind the scenes. So let's go ahead and take a look.
This is BazgrimTV. Learn, laugh, level up.
First, again, I want it to be very clear that what you see here is not the most up-to-date version of the game that has all the changes that Project Faerthale will bring, because it's just not ready for prime time yet. Although, after playing for a little while, they jumped out of the game to show some never-before-seen concepts and assets that will be included in Project Faerthale. And I'll get into that later, but even still, right off the bat, we can tell that this version of the game still has several improvements over the last time the game was shown publicly in December 2018. For example, there's some noticeable tweaks to the lighting, sounds, spell effects, and the UI, most notably the fact that you can now see all the buffs and their durations currently on a player in the group window, which is of course very helpful. But we also saw an updated spellbook and some examples of the special nameplates that players can earn that appear over their heads, which, by the way, can be toggled off if you want. And on top of all that, there were also a few new armor models and race models, such as the male and female dwarf. So just as a quick summary, the first part of the stream was a dungeon crawl through Halnir Cave, which may not be a new area to those that have been following the game, but the team used a pretty unusual group composition this time, which I think was good to show that you don't always need a classic group of 1 tank, 1 healer, 1 crowd control, and 3 DPS to succeed in Pantheon. Because this group consisted of Cohh playing an Ogre Warrior, Bendine playing as Mikhail the Dwarf Paladin, Linda Carlson playing as Brass the Dwarf Cleric, Brad McQuaid, of course, as Eridune the Human Warrior, Chris Perkins as Joppa the Human Shaman, and Mary Conley, who is a new web developer hired by Visionary Realms, playing as Myra the Gnome Enchanter. So that means that their group comp was 3 tanks, 2 healers, and 1 crowd control. Definitely unconventional to say the least, but it was a perfect example of how in Pantheon you can make almost any group composition work as long as you adjust your strategies to compensate for your group's strengths and weaknesses, especially depending on what kind of creatures you're going up against. So in this case, the fights were a little slower because they didn't have as much DPS, but they were also a little safer because they were high in defense. But the result was essentially the same in the end, as they were eventually able to make their way to Nashura, who is one of the main bosses in Halnir Cave, and take him down. Along the way though, I just have to mention that there was something interesting that most people might not have noticed, because there was actually a little hint about the bard hidden in there. If you'll remember back to PAX East 2018, I interviewed Visionary Realms creative director Chris Perkins about the classes in Pantheon, and that was when he first announced that he was confident from his perspective that the Bard would be available at launch. Well, in this latest Cohh stream, these gloves dropped from a mob, and the tooltip clearly shows that they can be equipped by bards, which is even more evidence that the Bard will probably be playable at launch. There were a few other little things in there that I won't get into right now, but it was overall quite enjoyable to watch, even if you've seen Halnir Cave before. And if you want to see more of that part of the stream, I'll provide a link to it. But let's dig into what you really came here for. What's coming next? What have they been working on behind the scenes? And what will Project Faerthale actually be like? The first thing is, of course, the animations. This has always been a hot topic ever since the devs first showed Pantheon on Twitch. For most people that watch the game for the first time, one of the main things they notice or comment on would be how the animations look outdated. And the devs have always said that they were just placeholder and would be improved. And in January 2019, Visionary Realms hired Ross Armstrong as their new lead animator, and ever since, he's been working on new animations. And in this stream, they showed updated warrior combat animations as well as climbing animations, which is the first time we've seen some of the progress that Ross has been making. And even still, keep in mind that these aren't the absolute finished products that will be at launch, but it certainly gives you a good idea of the direction they're going. Next, they teased us with some examples of how many aspects of the environment itself will impact gameplay in meaningful ways. And I'm just gonna let Joppa take this one away, because he explains it so well.
This one is so exciting to me because, again, one of the big kind of themes as we've been working on Project Faerthale is getting Pantheon to a point where it's more about showing and not telling. And we've talked a lot about the climate system and, you know, the different types of environments, the way the role weather will play. But this is the first time we're able to show, like when we say there's going to be a storm, there's a weather system with a real storm going on. That means that the aspects of that storm, everything from the wind, the rain, and the lightning, is going to actually be part of the play experience. And so this lightning bolt that we're showing here will actually be striking, and it will be pretty much an instant kill if you're struck directly by this bolt of lightning. You'll notice there's a little bit of a visual cue, about a 3-second telegraph happening on the ground before the strike. Gives you enough time to get out of the way, or to get as far out of the way as you can. There'll be some splash damage based on, you know, how far you are from that strike point, but you can imagine, you know, being in that experience of a massive real storm going on, where you're not just dealing with whatever enemies are in front of you, but you're actually literally having to take the environment into account, and it's merciless. So, and again, this is a much higher level encounter where we're able to be a lot more free with the difficulty and the complexity of the different elements going on at once. But I know it's a single lightning bolt, but man, it represents a lot. And so really excited to share that with you. Yeah, there's a lot of environmental art obviously going into the creation of new parts of the game. This is one piece, and it's kind of a wild looking piece, and maybe even a strange choice as far as all the things that we could have shown. But what I love about this is the way that it ties into the lightning bolt that we just saw. And so there are going to be these kind of pools, if you will, in this environment that are filled with this kind of reddish, almost like sap-like liquid. And what happens is this storm, which I'm not going to say any more about the storm or what it is or why it is, but these bolts of lightning, when they actually make contact with these pools, it causes this violent splash that almost instantly then flash freezes the liquid. And so you get these beautiful looking, crazy, wild, almost sculptures of this flash frozen resin in the environments where this lightning is striking. And as an Easter egg, once all of that, maybe not as an Easter egg, but just something to be aware of if you remember this, that when this environment is eventually released and people see it, you might want to go take a look in those pools and see what else could have been frozen in it.
So they are environmental props, but in the encounter that we're working on, it does serve a practical purpose as well, which you'll have to wait and see what that's all about.
And if that doesn't whet your appetite, the stream ended with this concept art. No explanation, just a cliffhanger. And with that, you should be up to speed on all the highlights of what was shown in this Pantheon stream. Hopefully you enjoyed it and it has piqued your interest about Project Faerthale and beyond. If so, like and subscribe so that you can continue to stay in the loop with my Pantheon coverage. And while you're at it, share this video so that others can stay informed as well. But until the next video, my name is Bazgrim,